When sharpening up spiral planers, they'll either be carbide, which this one is a carbide, it's a steel cast with a carbide insert here. Otherwise they'll just be a steel cutter. Now if you're doing the carbide ones like we're going to be sharpening up today, you'll use a 6-inch diamond top grinding wheel because you're going to end up using more of the side corner of the wheel, which will be fine because that's kind of what you do when you top grind a saw blade. If you have a side grinding wheel or the carbide joiner and planer knife cup wheel, you can also use that because then you will definitely not have any motor interference with the motor arbor there. If you're doing a steel cutter, you can use your 6-inch or 5-inch white aluminum oxide cup wheel that you use for joiner and planer knives. If you have a CBN wheel, you can use that as well, but I just always use my white cup wheel. Now the first time you get this cutter, you're going to want to set the fixture up a little bit. Most of your cutters are going to be about 2.5 inches in length, so you want this rod, the upper rod, to stick out past your fixture block about 2.5 times your cutter. And I'll explain that, why we do that. So when you slide your cutter on here, you want it to go and be tight against your block and have about a 1/2 inch of room for your finger, so that way you can still spin this to your next flute. And then you can also line it up to your grinding wheel decently. Now when you go onto your cutter and you grind through your grinding wheel and it spins through, you don't want the cutter to fall off the upper rod. So you want about 3/4 to an inch of clearance in front of the stop finger there. The stop finger is positioned always right underneath the flute of your bit in the center of it, so that way you can ride on there and pinch between the grinding wheel and spiral through and give you a nice consistent straight grind on all the flutes. So right there I kind of have my upper rod set decently, so I'm going to lock that down. The only time you'd have to change that is if you've got a 3-inch or maybe a 3.5 inch cutter. A 3-inch cutter you'd still be able to be fine with that because you've got a 1/2 inch more length, still got enough upper rod. And then your stop finger, just want to make sure that you're right in the center of that flute. Lock that down, because now you can see that you spiral through and you clear it nicely. Now, for starters, you're going to tip your motor up about 6 degrees, right of center. You'll fine tune it in once you get everything in there. I'm going to slide this all the way back to the bearing block. Then you want your stop finger to be about 1/16 of an inch away from your grinding wheel. So I'm going to position this in here, and you want your fixture set at an angle so that way when you come through here, your cutter doesn't hit your motor arbor. So you want it kind of set at an angle. You want your saddle assembly positioned in hole 1 on your base plate and hole 2 on your saddle assembly. I'm going to line this up here kind of temporarily. You want to lock your front stop so that way you don't really move in or out. You can adjust your depth in with your diameter adjusted slide. And I'm just going to snug stuff up just a little bit so I can still move it. Position my cutter right on top of there and bring it over towards the grinding wheel just a little bit. And I want my stop finger to be just a tiny bit back, so that way when I set my cutter on here, I can see a little bit of space there, so I can set my cutter on top of my stop finger, then grind through. Because otherwise you'd have to kind of wedge it in between there nicely, so you want just a little bit of clearance. Which right there I got just a tiny bit. So first I'm going to lock my slide. Bring it through, and I'm not hitting my wheel yet really, so I'm going to stop my finger because we can always move our motor in towards our cutter. Lock my fixture, bolt. Then I'm going to take my felt pen and I'm going to mark my wing. Forgot to mention too, on this spiral planer, this is a carbide one, most of them are just going to have one solid angle on there. This one has a primary and a secondary angle. Your secondary angle is just a relief so that way when you're cutting through your material it doesn't hit the back side of that carbide. So we're going to do the primary angle first and then we'll sharpen up the secondary. Just going to mark my wings. And you can see right now how I have this set up. I got plenty of clearance from that motor arbor, and I will pass through that nicely. So now I'm going to bring it in here, and I'm going to bring my motor in, bring my cutter about, a quarter inch into my grinding wheel. I'm going to move my motor in, do a little scratch test. Pull it out, and I can see that I'm hitting my primary angle perfectly. Sometimes you might have to tip it up a degree or two, but in this application it's set up really nice. So we want to make sure that we just have a very nice light grind, which we're going to right now. We're going to turn our motor on and we're going to sharpen up our first flute. Now after we're done sharpening and we run this through, we're going to turn our motor off to bring it back and reposition it in. And then we'll just switch to our other flute, and if we take off 3 passes on one flute, we're going to take off 3 passes on the next flute and then sharpen up the secondary angle. I can already tell that I'm going to need more than one grind on this one, so I'm going to just sharpen up probably the whole flute right away. So I'm just positioning on my finger again. Then I'm going to turn my wheel on. Slide it back into position. Set it on my finger. And now I can tell that this whole entire surface has been sharpened up nicely. If you have a steel cutter, you'll see a burr, but in this application I can see that all my felt is ground off of there, and the cutting edge looks really nice. So now I'm going to go over to my next wing and I'm going to give 3 grinds on that one. I'm going to have to move my motor in a little bit, so that means this wing's just a fuzz higher than the other one, so I'll have to touch up the other one just a little bit afterwards. Bring it back into position. One more grind here. One more. It's going to be good. Now that edge looks nice and clean. We did move our motor in a little bit, so we're going to touch up the other wing just a fuzz. Make sure they're the same height. I'll do 2 grinds on this, and that'll bring it to the height of the other flute. And now we got our primary angle all nice and sharp. Now for the secondary angle, it's usually about a 10 to 15 degree difference. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to bring it up 15 degrees more. And bring it up to about 18 degrees. I'll try that out. Now when we set this on, we'll have to bring our motor in a little bit. We're not going to change any other setup at all. The secondary angle is not as critical as the primary. Right here I can see that I'm hitting a little bit high of everything, but I'm going to leave that because that's just going to remove a little bit more off that back side and give it a little bit more relief, so that'll be fine. Now we're just going to sharpen up in the exact same manner. Back through, set on our finger. Bring our motor in just a fuzz. Do one more cut. That secondary angle is done. I'm going to switch over to our other flute. One more grind and we should be complete. Now our secondary angle is done, and it looks just about the same as when we started, and it's nice and sharp, and that's all it takes to sharpen up a spiral planer. Router bit sharpening, you're going to use your 4-inch diamond grinding wheel for your carbide bits, and you're going to use a 2-inch aluminum oxide wheel for steel bits. When you use the 2-inch wheel and you put it onto your arbor, you just want to use the nut for your motor. You don't want to use the washer because it's going to cover up your whole surface here. So you'll just use the nut. I'm not going to go into the steel router bits because it's the same exact setups and sharpening as the carbide, so I'll kind of demonstrate that. Now, on most of your router bits, you're going to have a bearing here. Now, if your diamond wheel is going to hit your bearing, you're definitely going to want to remove it. Sometimes if you have a larger router bit, it's not going to get in the way, so you can leave it on. A lot of times I just remove them always. So you can remove this. I like to keep everything in the same position, so that way I don't lose anything. You just got to be careful because sometimes they're small and they like to get away from you. Set that off to the side. You want to clean it right on a standard wire wheel like everything else. Now with your router bit fixture, you do have a pin here that will lock it at 90 degrees. You're not going to use it most of the time, but once in a while you might use it. And then you also have your adapter to get the bit underneath the grinding wheel, and we'll explain that later on as well. The saddle assembly I always put in the first hole on the base plate, and also the first hole in the saddle assembly. You can use the second one on some smaller ones, but I usually just move the slide forward a little bit more to do that. So, put the router bit fixture on. Line up your wheel. Tighten it down. Now when you put these in here, I like to keep them, I don't like to bring them all the way in because then your wheel has a tendency to hit the front of the chuck a little bit. So I'll just keep it away a little, give myself enough proper room. And tighten it in there. And you do have two bolts here. One is going to be your fixture hold down bolt, and then this one also sets the angle. When you do get into sharpening it, there's this top one. I like to spin my bit into my wheel. Some people like to line it up and lock this down and just go straight in and out. I like to turn it in and out. So that's just more of a preference, and I'll go through that a little bit in a minute. So same with everything else. Loosen this, get that pin, keep everything where it moves nice and free. You want it kind of snug, just so that way it gives a little bit of, it's a lot easier to set up. Loosen your slide, move your stop away a little bit, and you're just going to bring this in here. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up according to my grinding wheel. You know, I'm just going to bring it in here, swivel it in, and lock it back and forth. And you can kind of push your bit against the wheel to make sure that you're, you know, nice and tight against everything. So I'm going to line this up first. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten my slide back here. Once I get that lined up, because now I can still move this in and out. If I have to make some adjustments, I always can, because I can always move my motor in and out a little bit as well. Then I'm going to lock my fixture down. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, because now my fixture doesn't move, my slide doesn't move, I can just adjust up and down, and you want to get this in there so that way you can sharpen up the whole carbide surface. And you can kind of see how right here I'm only hitting in there, and I'll bring it all the way in so I get that whole section. And I'll lock that down. And now we're set up there. You want to always use your front stop on this as well. And bring it so that way my wheel doesn't hit the cast of the rotor bit. And now I'm going to check to make sure I'm lined up correctly. Right now I can see that I'm going to be hitting a little bit more on the cutting surface. I always also felt pen these. And to be able to get in the inside more, if you move your motor to the left, that'll allow you to grind the whole surface of the carbide. So now I'll turn my motor on, turn my dust collector on, and I'll just do a test grind to see how I'm lined up. And right here I can see that I'm hitting a lot more on the exterior surface, pretty much almost the whole thing. A little bit on the very bottom side of the carbide I'm not hitting, so I'll probably just move my motor to the left a little bit more to get inside there better. And like I mentioned, I like to turn my bit into it and grind inwards. You can lock that. If you do 4 passes on that flute, you want to do 4 passes on the other one. Now I've sharpened up both of them. This one has a new cutting surface on it, but this one I need a little bit more work on it, so I'm going to sharpen up 1 or 2 more passes to get that cleared out nicely. Move my motor in a fuzz, and then I'll do the same thing on the other one. See that the surface is totally cleaned, and you should have a new edge on that whole router bit. And then I'll just remove this one from the chuck. If I have other bits like this, I'll sharpen them all up at the same time, because I might only have to move my angle up and down a little bit. Now I have a straight flute bit here. This is a shorter straight flute bit. A lot of times they're going to be longer. They're going to be at the 1.5 to 2 inch range. This one's about 1 inch long. And when I put this in here, I'll show you that I should be able to set it up regular and just sharpen it up, you know, without having the adapter on, because you will be able to get your whole surface here. And I'll just kind of show you this. Just going to loosen everything up a little bit. You can see that I can get that surface there, so I wouldn't have to put the adapter piece on there, but just for training purposes, I'm going to show you how to use that added extension on there. So when you do that, you're going to remove the chuck itself from the fixture, the long bolt there. You're going to grab your add-on, and you're going to attach it onto the side here. You want this angled part slanting downward so that way it doesn't hit into your fixture. Let's see if I can turn this sideways a little bit more to see everything here. Thread this in. And this is slotted so that way you can move it around as you need it. And then I'm going to take my chuck, and you can put your chuck either way. You can do it this way. I like to bring it around underneath because you can see how much farther down that bit goes. If you have a real thick casting router bit, you're going to want to put it down below so that way you can get underneath the grinding wheel a little bit easier. But you can do it either way. I always put it so my knob is down. And that's how you add that on there. And you can see now how it goes underneath your grinding wheel to be able to get all the way underneath there. So now I'll just snug everything up just a little bit. I'm going to line it up to my grinding wheel. First thing, I'm going to lock my slide. Then I'm going to lock my fixture bolt. And now you can still move both of these. So I'll tighten my top one. And I'll tighten my one by my chuck. Now you have that set up. You see that I gotta lower this one just a little bit. Now you'd be able to sharpen that whole contour. You want to set your front stop again. And then I'm going to do one light pass. See that I'm hitting right by the cutting surface, so I'll move my motor in a little bit more. And now I can see that I'm hitting more by the outer surface versus the back side here, so I'm going to actually have to take and move my fixture to the left a little bit to line that up a little bit better. Loosen this just a little bit. And here again, I'm just going to bring it up to my wheel and I'm just going to turn it a little ways. And then I'm going to move my motor in instead of resetting everything up. And relock that down. I'm sharpening up the surface pretty good now. surface sharpened, and that's all it takes. In the router bits, you can sharpen these up with your motor up at the 90 position. There is an extra hole in here, so your lock pin, if you bring your motor up to 90, will slide in to hold that up there. This is where you'll use your pin inside your fixture to hold this set at 90 as well. It does eliminate on your straight flute bits having to use your adapter piece. I don't feel that it's easier to be able to see, but some people sharpen their router bits always like this. So you'll basically set it up the same exact way. Line up your fixture in the back here, tighten your bolt, and then you'll just bring your motor head down and kind of turn that in and grind back and forth with your front stop, just like you would if your motor was down at the 0 quadrant. And I just wanted to show you the other way that you can sharpen up router bits as well. With raised panel shaper cutters, they're pretty much the same technique as sharpening up a router bit. You're just going to sharpen up the face of it inside of here. You're not going to do the exterior profile. I always mark my blade with a felt pen and then also mark the first tooth that I'm going to be sharpening. Now, we do have two different fixtures. We have one that does your smaller shaper cutter arbors, which is a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and then we have our large diameter one that does 1 1/4 inch. You can see this shaper cutter is obviously going to be your smaller one, and you can see how it's wobbled around here, and you're going to want the short end here facing towards the grinding wheel, because that way your grinding wheel will never hit the cast of your fixture. You use just a standard face grinding wheel. You can use a 4-inch wheel if it fits better, but I always find that a 6-inch wheel works better. You can sharpen them a couple different ways as well. Now, with this smaller cutter, I always position it in hole number 1 on your base plate over on the far side, and then the center hole in your saddle assembly. If you have a larger one, you can always go to hole number 1 in the saddle assembly and bring your whole fixture backwards. So I'll be putting my fixture on here, and I'll just kind of keep it somewhat loose right now until I get it lined up to make sure that I'm on the low part here. If you can do it two different ways. If this grinding wheel was the other way, you can put it on here and you can grind in like that and go and face grind this way. But sometimes your wheel won't hit the very top of your carbide or your steel in there. So you can put the side grinding spacer underneath to tip your fixture downward, so that way you get more of that in there. Otherwise, you can sharpen them this way and put your cutter in upside down, because now the grinding wheel is going to hit underneath there. When you come inside here, it's going to hit that whole profile underneath, and it doesn't really matter on this back side, because you can see here that the carbide slants back. So in this training purpose, I'm going to bring it in this way. So now you basically just line it up like you would a regular saw blade or a regular router bit, and you bring it in here. And I can get pretty close here, so now I'm going to put my fixture where my grinding wheel is not going to hit into it. And I'm just going to lock that down right away. This up. So your diamond adjusting slide, you can basically swivel that right in there. You can see how I'm kind of holding it, and I just bring it in till I line it up right there, and then I'm going to lock my slide. And then if you are grinding this and you're noticing that you need to make some fine-tune adjustments, let's say you were hitting more towards just your cutting surface but not in the inside, you can take your motor and you can bring it over to the left, and that's going to swivel your shaper cutter, so that way it'll get to the inside edge. Or vice versa, if you were hitting towards the back side and not towards the cutting surface, you can bring your motor to the right to reline that up to make any fine-tune adjustments there. So we're going to line this up here. I'm just going to bring it in and out a little bit just to make sure that I'm kind of lined up. I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to set my front stop so that way I don't hit into the cast. And then I'm going to go to my tooth that I'm going on. I'm going to do probably one pass first time just to see where I'm sharpening. I'll remove it real quick. And I'm pretty much lined up nicely. So I'm going to leave my setup right there. Don't have to make any adjustments. And now if you sharpen, let's say 4 passes on one flute, sharpen up 4 passes on all the other flutes, and you're going to sharpen it up balanced. Let's check it out here. And I can see that I got pretty much all my red out there, so I got a new cutting edge on there. So I'm just going to continue and sharpen up the other 2 flutes. Inspect my cutter just to make sure, and I can see that this one has a little spot on the top, this one hits all the way, and this one I need a little bit more work, so I'm going to sharpen this one up a couple more passes until I get that new clean edge, and then I'll sharpen up the same amount on the other one. And now I can see I have a new clean edge on the whole inside there, and it should sharpen up nicely. Now one thing to keep in mind, when you do come off this wheel, you don't want to come off the carbide because you could roll over that edge. So you want to come right to about halfway on your diamond section right there, pull away and bring it back so you don't roll that edge over. And that's all it really takes to sharpen up a raised panel shaper cutter. So removing the burr from wood chisels, joiner and planer knives, or primarily any kind of steel bits, wood block planes, we use our 5-inch standard buffing wheel to remove that burr. All you really do is bring it across your leading edge on top, and then bring it across your bottom edge to bend that burr back and forth to remove it. You can use a whetstone if you want. Some people prefer to use that. I prefer to use the standard buffing wheel after I have, sharpened all my joiner and planer knives or wood chisels. Some people will mount it to a separate motor or machine. I don't feel it's really necessary. It takes a couple seconds just to switch that wheel out. I always leave my motor locked at the 0 quadrant, turn my machine on. You can dress it on at a flat spot, but after a time it will wear into positioning. If you want to dress it, you can refer to the chapter on our diamond point dresser and dressing grinding wheels. So I turn my motor on. Just run this back and forth. Very light pressure is all it takes. Kind of feel on top once you bring it back and forth that there's no burr left on that one, so that's done. Here again, burr bent off and it's gone. feel any burr on there, so that means that is removed. And that is pretty much all it takes to remove that burr from joiner any kind of steel bits. When using the diamond point dresser, a lot of times when you're dressing your white or pink cup wheels for dude and joiner and planer knives or lawnmower blades, things like that, I'll have the saddle assembly positioned in hole 2 of the base plate and hole 2 of the saddle assembly. Now you can use this fixture to dress in a couple different ways, especially with your joiner and planer knife wheel. If you keep it more straight here, you can obviously dress a straight point into the wheel. But if you've been using your wheel a while and it's kind of gummed up or something like that, you can kick your fixture or your saddle assembly more at an angle and bring it in here to create the same wear pattern that you get when you're sharpening up your joiner and planer knives right there to redress the face of it. So in this application, I'm going to just dress the face of this wheel with just a slight taper. Lock my saddle assembly here. Now when you're doing this, you want to cover up your rods because you are going to make a little bit of a mess just to protect getting stuff inside there. Bring this in here. And I'm just going to bring it up to where I'm just about to touch it. I'm going to lock my slide. Then I'm going to lock my tool fixture. And then when I'm sharpening on this, I'm going to just go nice and slow across the face of the wheel. Then when I start to taper off and not really dress anything anymore, I'm going to bring my motor in more towards the saddle assembly or towards the diamond point dresser. I don't really use a front stop here. I just kind of bring it back and forth because the more that you start to grind into there, the more the flat spot you're going to create. So I'm going to turn my motor on here. And I'm just going to keep kind of playing with the motor going in. And now you can see that I've created a little bit of a flat spot there for sharpening that up, but normally if you'd have your whole section kind of worn, you'd just clean it up until any tarnishing that would be on there would be out of the way. The reason why I picked this wheel is because the face was a little bit out of balance, so I just dressed it so that way it's running true now. And that's pretty much all it takes for redoing your cup wheels. Now you can use your diamond point dresser to dress your resin bond wheels. The main reason for dressing your resin bond wheels would be with the hole saw fixture. You can just round this corner off a little bit to conform it into the tooth of the hole saw itself. In that application, I usually put my saddle assembly, I'll slide it over into hole 1 of my base plate just to create that little bit of a round. One other key note with the diamond point dresser, you never want to use it to dress any CBN wheels or diamond wheels. You will only ruin the wheel itself. When you clean those, you want to use the white dressing stick that came in the box with the grinding wheel. Lightly touch it on the diamond section. Don't rub it back and forth, just lightly touch it, and then move the white stone over until any tarnishings will come off. You will definitely see, you can see here that I've used this one. You can see that that tarnishing will come right out of the bonding agencies of the diamond wheel until it started out black here and then tapered off and got clean. With lawnmower blades, you mount your lawnmower blade fixture right on the 1-inch plug on your diameter adjusting slide of your saddle assembly. You can sharpen your standard straight blades, which is just going to be one single angle on your lawnmower blade, and you can also do the mulching blades. I do them just fine on here, and I'll show you how to sharpen up both of them. I'll start with the straight one. Now, I'll always take the fixture, see, like on this lawnmower blade, it's nice and flat, so it's going to ride on here nicely. The mulching blade, and some straight ones even too, you know, have a cast inset like this, or the side will swoop down or something where it doesn't ride flat. You can see that it tips and rocks and everything like that, and you kind of come up at an angle. So you can use the block underneath here to raise that up so that way you won't hit anything, and you'll see that more when I get into this blade. But for now, for the flat one, there's no need to put it on. You really don't have to use it. So I kind of just set my blade on my lawnmower fixture, and I always lock my front stop forward so that way my slide doesn't move. You know, my bearing block doesn't move forward or anything. It keeps everything stationary. I always put my fixture or my saddle assembly in the center hole of your saddle assembly and the far right hole on your base plate. And I'll just bring this in forward here. And you can kind of see here, I got this, you know, about 3/4 to an inch away from the grinding wheel, so it just doesn't make contact or anything like that. And then I'll just kind of position this just to match. I just kind of match the taper that I already have on my wheel, so that way it doesn't dress a different angle. It really doesn't matter. I mean, if your flat spot is this way, it doesn't matter if your fixture's here. I just kind of match up the grinding surface so you get more stock removal. This is the standard 5-inch white cup wheel that comes with the AV-40 package. You can use, we do have a pink wheel available. It's a little bit harder. It will give you a little bit faster stock removal, and you can always purchase one of those if you wish, but it's not really that necessary. So I'll just kind of match this up, and then I'm going to lock my slide here. Lock my fixture down. Now on lawnmower blades, I always leave my motor at 0, because you do have a bolt right here that your table bed will tilt to match that angle. And you can fine tune it by just moving it by hand. So I'll just bring my lawnmower blade up to there and just kind of spin my wheel. See if I'm hitting my surface, and I'm hitting a little bit more towards the grinding, or the cutting edge of it. I'll flip it over and kind of do the same thing on the other side. This one I'm hitting pretty much perfect, so I'll probably just leave it in that area. You just got to recreate the edge. The angle of it is not totally necessary. You just kind of got to get a happy medium between the two, get a nice edge, and it's going to cut beautifully. So now with lawnmower blades, a lot of times this edge here and this edge, it's not perfectly straight. So I will just kind of start backwards and bring it back towards me, because it's going to lift up off the backrest here. And I'll just bring it backwards. So I'll set it so that way I hit my outside edge here. I'll turn my machine on. And I just let the weight of the blade kind of go down and grind the edge. And just bring it back and forth till I got a nice sharp edge. I kind of look here, so I can feel that I'm still a little bit dull, but you're going to sharpen this edge before that. So once I get, let's say, a section like this nice and sharp, I'll kind of start here and work my way down so I don't have to do the whole edge. And until I got a nice sharp edge right at that edge, so I'm going to start moving my way down. Move her in a little bit. Affect it a little bit. Nice sharp edge on the whole thing. I got a couple different tiers here, so I'll just give it a couple passes all the way through to eliminate that. Now I can see I got a nice sharp edge across the whole thing, and I'll flip it around. And a lot of times you might have to back your motor up or move your motor in. Now we got a new edge created on here. You're going to have a burr on the bottom side. You can use your polishing wheel to remove that burr, but it's just a lawnmower blade, so I just take the edge of my bench and just run it that way and run it that way to remove the burr. Then I set it down on my balancer here. And you can see this blade is the first time I've had to sharpen this one. You can see that it's pretty much in balance right now. It is kind of critical because you can throw off some parts in your mower deck. So this one's in balance. If it wasn't in balance and this side, let's say, is wanting to drop, that means this side is heavier. So I'll take and just remove some of the steel on the side right there on my stone wheel on my bench grinder, just to remove some of that weight. Instead of trying to keep sharpening your sharpening edge, it just takes a lot more time to sharpen up a lawnmower blade when you can just remove a little bit of that steel. And now I will show you how to do more of the mulching blades. Alright, with the mulching blade, I can see that I do have to use the riser block. So I just set it underneath here, thread it through the center arbor. The bolt that comes with it, there is a small chance that it will go through the bottom. You might have to just put a different bolt, so it doesn't go through the cast of that steel that's right there. So now I'll put this on here. I already know that my fixture is kind of lined up, with the proper angle, but you have two tiers. So I'll have to set up to do this tier, then I'll have to set up to do this tier. Your swoop never really gets that dull. I just touch that up with a Dremel, and I'll show you how I kind of touch that up. But to get the 2 points, it's kind of nice to get a consistent edge. So I'm going to start with my lower edge down here because I'm already kind of set up for that from the previous one that I sharpened. I can see that I do have to change my angle here. So I'll loosen this bolt. Bring my motor in. Kind of get it about approximate. Pull it down. Kind of tighten it. And here I know I'm hitting really good. If I did have to switch this, I would just lightly use it with my hand to move it back and forth. So, again here I'm going to work from the center out. There, I'm hitting the angle really nicely, and I just go from where this swoop kind of comes down and starts going straight. You can see that this one needs quite a bit more work. Is nice and sharp, but I need a little bit more towards that inside. Got that nice and sharp. You can see there's some nicks taken out of this blade. It's not critical. I would leave it. Shut the motor off so you can hear better. I would leave those nicks in there because you do still have a new cutting surface on there. You don't have to remove all those. That would take a long time to get all those nicks out of it. So now I'll flip it around, and I can see I got to bring my motor in for this side, and I'll repeat the process. So now I'll set up and do the top tier. So for this, you can either move your motor back or you can set your angle up. I'm just going to bring my motor back more. And now I will have a different angle. If you had a set of 3, I would sharpen up all three blades to the lower mark before I would reset up. There. Any more towards that leading edge, so I'm just going to tip this down just a little bit. A little bit more. Now I'm hitting that surface nicely, and I'll do the top portion of that. See, now you can see that I'm hitting that motor hub there, so I will have to take my fixture and cock it sideways a little bit. So that way, and I'll just loosen up my slide and just slide this in. I'm still hitting at that point. Have to change my angle a little bit. And now I can sharpen the top. Now I got a new edge on that top, and spin it around. Now I created a new edge there. Now to do the swoop in there, I'll use a Dremel, and I'll kind of just match the angle on there to recreate the edge on that. Feel that I got a kind of a new edge there. That really doesn't get dull that much. And now we got that blade sharpened up. And then to deburr it, I also just use my table bed right here again. I noticed by this blade that we had to do a lot more work to it, so it'll probably be a little bit more out of balance. So we'll set it here on our balancer. And you can see that this edge wants to fall down, so there's more steel on there, so we'll remove some off the side instead of resharpening all of this to, you know, just take a lot of extra time. So I'll just go on my bench grinder here. And I don't really remove any off of the tip, so that way you still get your whole cutting diameter. Now you can see that it's pretty darn close. I could remove a little bit more, but I think that is more than suffice for being balanced. And then I would just balance the other two blades, and that's the sharpening process of the lawnmower blades. With wood chisels, you can sharpen short-handled chisels or the long-handled chisels, thin or wide, doesn't really matter. There are two ways to mount this fixture down. You can use your knife grinding clamp that would go through your center hole of your base plate, and you can mount it down like that. Or I use the saddle assembly lockdown because we did add two threaded holes in the bottom of the base, and I use the farthest hole to the right, and I clamp it down with the saddle assembly lock. Now I will have in the written instructions for the wood chisel fixture kind of how I set this up. I set it up more at an angle like this because you'll get a nice little hollow grind, so that way when you peel into the wood it curls away from your hand. You can put it more straight and you'll get more of a straight grind. You want to cock it at a little bit of an angle so you don't hit both sides of the grinding wheel. You use your standard 5-inch cup white wheel that you get with your knife grinding fixture with the AV-40 package. And I just mount it through. Once I put my fixture on for the first time, I do like to kind of put a couple little black lines so that way it kind of always goes in the same positioning. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my motor up to about 50 degrees just to kind of get it, you know, up in the air so I can mount my chisel in there. It doesn't have to be exact, just bring it to about 50 degrees. I'll keep this tensioning knob just a little bit loose so I can thread my motor up and down nicely. I'll do my big chisel here first, and I like to felt pen my edge so I can match that angle decently. You'll notice on the fixture too here, I'll bring this out of the way, there is a set pin right inside the top, and then there's a rolling one on the back side. So if this ever would get off square, we do have it set square initially. You can loosen this set screw and you can roll that pin through to re-square it up. So you just set it against the two stops. Make sure you're square in there. Tighten it down with a 1/2-inch wrench. You don't have to over tighten it. And then I'll bring it in towards my wheel. You can also use an angle finder here to find your angle on your chisel. This one is showing a 64 degree. So I'll bring my motor up here. And then I'll bring my, just do a little spin test to test my angle. I'm hitting more just right at the cutting surface, so I'm going to bring my motor up just a little bit more. Test it. That chisel nice across the whole surface. I'll back my motor up a little bit. I'll turn my motor on and move my chisel back and forth as I'm kind of going into it until my grinding wheel starts to make just small contact with it. little shower of sparks. You don't want to grind too heavy, or you'll kind of ramp on and off each end and kind of round over the edges. You just want to bring it back and forth so you get a nice burr underneath here. Angle finder, you can kind of use the underneath side to raise that burr up to make sure you have it. Now I have a new burr that peeled up the whole entire way, so I'm going to do a couple light, real light passes. We have a new burr, which is created on the edge of the chisel. Telling you that it's sharp. I'll remove that burr. You can either use a whetstone and run it underneath and over the top. Otherwise, you can use our polishing wheel. I like to use our polishing wheel or deburring wheel, but I'll do that after I've sharpened up both chisels. And I'll take this chisel out, switch it over to my next one. Set it in there. Tighten it down, bring my edge here, match this up. This is showing about a 60 degree, so I'm going to remove my motor. Same operation. This one's a little shorter, so I got to bring my motor down closer. Do a scratch test. I'm hitting more towards my leading edge of my chisel, so I'll bring it up just a little bit. Repeat that. Now I'm catching the whole surface. Back my motor up just a fuzz. Turn it on. We're going to grind it through so we get that burr. Bring this through. And you see I got a nice consistent burr, so I'm going to give 1-2 more small light passes. Turn my motor off, back it up, and then we can see here that we got a nice consistent burr across that whole entire edge, showing that we have a new edge. And then you can either take a whetstone to bring it underneath, then over the top to loosen that burr to break it off, or you can see our chapter on deburring chisels and joiner and planer knives using our standard buffing wheel.